again. Wow, this has been a busy year. Hey, everybody. Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV, winding down the year. I can't believe it's November. We're winding down November. I'm thrilled to announce a first-time offender, yet again, another new guest for the first time, Brian Sachs of Mynd Reader, not only a great drummer, but wrote the lyrics to their new single that drops today, November 22nd, and is called Radio Warning. Great name, Brian, for a single to drop, Radio Warning, as if to give everyone a heads up of here's what's to come. Rock and soul is their thing. Brian, welcome. It's so fun to have you for your first time.
Thanks, Dan. It's awesome to be here. I really appreciate it.
Great. My pleasure. I was telling my wife, I think it was yesterday, who, not that I ever confused with other women, folks, but I'm just trying to remember. I think the conversation was with my wife where I said, this year, we've had more first-time guests than ever before, other than our first year, of course, which was 12 years ago this January. I can't believe that. The documentary of our first 10 years comes out on December 8th at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time, and it's all about our first 10 years. So, folks, watch for that. We're having a live watch party on YouTube and Facebook. But I want to talk about Mynd Reader, and let's test it real quick. Okay, so ready, Brian, read my mind. What am I thinking?
Radio Warning. Something
Radio
with Radio
Warning.
Warning.
Exactly. That's it. It's such a great song. Let's talk about this. And here's a photo with your musical partner, Matt Shulz. And let's talk about how does your process work? Where does the music come from? How do you two work together? And then we'll dive into your drumming and influence in your history.
So in terms of the songwriting or the recording process, or?
Yeah, let's start with that.
So in terms of the songwriting, it's funny being a drummer. I've never really been a songwriter ever in any of the bands that I've ever been in my entire life. And, but I am my whole life, I'm an avid listener of music, and I'm nonstop. So maybe all these songs that I've listened to, I could probably go on Rock and Roll Jeopardy and do really well.
Oh, wait a minute there. We have a twice a month music trivia game show. I've got to invite you to one of those so you can come and see how you do. It's a lot of fun. That's cool.
I would do pretty well if it's rock and roll and genre. Like I have my knowledge base pretty good, man.
Cool. That's awesome. I'll send you some info about that. That'd be awesome to have you.
So I met Matt like 10 years ago, and I was in a band. I just have to give a little background just to songwriting.
Sure. Absolutely.
Some basis, but I was in a pretty big band in the 90s called The Authority, and we toured all over America. We were doing 200 shows a year for 7 years straight, and just locked into drumming. Heavy funk. It was a heavy funk band, and that's really where I learned to be a musician. But it was hard, man. It's hard to make a living. It's hard to be on the road 200 shows a year.
A lot.
And all our friends were hitting it big. Spin Doctors, Blues Traveler, Joan Osborne. Dave Matthews opened up for us at the Wetlands. Wow. And then we just couldn't, in those days, you had to get a record deal. That was it. Yeah. And my favorite question that everybody would ask, they would say, hey, man, why aren't you guys signed? And you just don't know how to answer that. But
right. Like, Dan, why are you bald? Like, what? It's just as puzzling because the answer's so obvious, right?
So I left music for 20 years, 25 years. I played in bands, but for fun. Yeah. And then I got into a band that was more like acid jazz, and we were playing, and it was improvisational music. And I wasn't able to dig in or play the way that I like to play. I have a stage name that I made up for myself. It's Turner Downs, which stands for Turn It Down.
That's hilarious. Turner Downs. That's funny.
And with The Authority, I was used to playing like these big places where I could dig in, and I love Bonham, Keith Moon. I love like I play heavy. I like to feel the drums. I could be very dynamic, but I love rock and roll. I like really digging in. And in my later years, playing places that would serve food, there are kids, there are dogs, there, and playing like, and I'm like,
Yeah. Kind of like park and festival atmospheres, things like
yeah.
that.
And I was
That's
like,
cool.
oh man, I don't know if I feel this. So, make a long story a little longer, and I got to just get to the answer. I was playing in this band, this acid jazz band, and the first guy that I met when I auditioned for that band was Matt Shulz, my partner now. And Matt was really hip, like really hip pads, really hip vibe. And he quit the band about 2 weeks after I joined it.
Oh, wow.
So
Did you
fast
have anything
forward.
to do with that, do you think?
No, he's not the type of guy. He's unconventional, and he's not like the type of guy that's going to sit and has played 1,400 shows and wants that vibe. He's more a studio cat
Yeah.
and is a cerebral guy. So he just was. He didn't feel that he was right for that project, and I was like, "Come on, man, do it." And then 10 years later, I got thrown out of that band.
For not turning it down?
I think that might have something to do with it.
That's so funny. That's great.
So the day I got thrown out, I called Matt because at this age of the game, I became an entrepreneur. I sold my company, and my passion is music. I'm a drummer. It's what I've always been, and nobody knew me as that as an entrepreneur. And it's almost like that part of me went dormant for 20 years. Like I played, but it wasn't a full expression of my musicality and everything I feel inside. And music is my life. Music saved my life. Music is who I am. It's the greatest gift of my life is music.
Yeah.
So I called Matt the day I got thrown out, and he said, "Yo, man, cool out, get yourself together." Because I'm like, at that age of the game, I'm like, I may never play again, or I'm going to just be regulated to playing Turner Downs. And it's going to be, I saw an article in The Onion just about a musician being interviewed, and the gig had to stop because the dogs were howling too much at the gig.
That's so funny. Oh my God.
So I went up. One of my friends was playing that I used to play with on July 4th weekend, and me and my son went up to go see him a town north of here in Boulder, Netherlands. And I never would go out, never do anything. But my son was in for the weekend, and he's over 21. So I was like, hey, let's go up. Who do I run into but Matt Shulz? And I go,
wow.
oh, boy, this is a sign. And
Yeah.
what I said to him that day, I was like, let's play the music we grew up in. You know, when you're 13, 14 years old and you're listening, for me, it was when I heard Back in Black for the first time, or my God, Zeppelin. I'm getting the chills right now. My brother had his album collection, and he used to beat my ass in if I went into his room because I would skip his records, and I put Black Sabbath Paranoid on. And it was like, I'm getting the chills now because it was so powerful to hear Billy Ward drum on War Pigs, and just the mystique of that. And then when I heard John Bonham play, and Keith Moon was like, oh my God, that's everything that I wish I could be in my life. I saw you play along with Keith Emerson, ELP, Carl Palmer.
Yeah.
I was like, it was.
Oh, I love playing that stuff.
I love it. So I was like, I've had enough of acid jazz. I've had enough of a lot of the playing now of out here, and a lot of musicians. It's like a dotted eighth feel. A dot, da, 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 da. There's no like boom, to ba, ba, boom, to, gu, gu, ba, ba. There's none of that. And I said, Matt, let's play what we grew up on. Let's play rock and roll, that nobody could tell us to turn it down, that we could just have fun like we're kids again. And the way equipment is right now, our recording studio is here in the basement. So I met Matt, and he is the type of guy, he calls them nuggets. And he just poops out these great rhythms. And then I started to be able to write vocal lines and lyrics. And I had a lot going on in my personal life, and I've been a spiritual seeker my whole life. And all of a sudden, these melodies and lyrics started to come to me from his nuggets that he would call
That's
them.
cool.
And we laid them down. And there is a brilliant musician out here. He's at the heart of the Denver music scene. His name is Eddie Roberts. And Eddie plays with the new Master Sounds. And Eddie is just one of the greatest guys. So when I sold my company with me and my partners, we had a huge party. And we hired Eddie to play Nikki Gillespie, who is just an unbelievable drummer.
Yeah, she was on years ago with us. Yeah. Nikki
She was on the gig.
great.
So,
oh, nice.
So one of the conditions I had
Wasn't
was
she in Dumpster Funk?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Nikki rocks.
Nikki, she played with Beyonce.
Yeah.
So Nikki was on the gig, and one of the conditions I said was, and nobody knew me as a drummer, and I think they're all expecting me to come up and play Mustang Sally or something, and it's like my bar mitzvah, and I could just
That's so funny.
And I was going to be like, hey, everybody, look at me play. Do pop. And I approached the gig because I'm like, oh, my God, I got Nikki Gillespie, and I got the audacity to come in and sit in with Eddie Roberts, Nikki Gillespie. Like, I was
what did you end up playing?
Chris picked the keyboard player. He said, learn this Meters tune. Why the gig was going on, like when they took an intermission, I put that on. I played another Meters tune, Bayou, Fire on the Bayou, something like that.
Fire on the Bayou, I think it's called.
Fire on the Bayou, and some of the, like, my specialty, funk. But I was like a man possessed that night. I was like, this
Did
is
people
my opportunity.
freak out that didn't know you as a drummer?
Freaked out because it was like, somebody said to me, who are you, Brian Sachs? I don't even know who you are because they only knew me as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then Eddie saw that I could play. And then me and Eddie forged a major friendship. So I started to get dialed in. So Eddie is in a new band called the Lucky Strokes. And if you haven't seen them, check them out. In fact, they're actually dropped a new single today. And the singer, we actually dropped October 22nd.
Oh, I thought it was today. Okay, cool.
And we're over 42,000 streams already on Radio Warning, which is really incredible.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm thrilled about that. So Eddie's singer is a guy named Shelby Kemp. And Shelby is this old soul. If I could sing, I would sing. In fact, I would never talk. I would just sing all day long if I could sing like Shelby. Shelby could sing the phone book and it would sound incredible. He just has this old soul. It was, I always dreamt I was a singer, always. Really? And I just don't have it. And Shelby had that voice, and Eddie was kind enough to allow us to use Shelby for our project. And
I want to jump in there and tell you something, okay? So I was going to tell the audience, and here I go, I'll just say it now, that if I were to describe the music and what I like about the music, and it's always subjective, of Radio Warning is, wow, the first thing I thought of was, it sounds so familiar, but I know I never heard it before. You said to Matt, let's play what we grew up with. And then I'm listening to the song and I thought, wow, this is so refreshing. And it's what I call time capsule music. But to me, time capsule music doesn't sound dated and left behind. To me, it's a revival of music that did so well in a certain time period. And that's exactly what I hear in your music. So it's so interesting that as you tell the story, you said to Matt, let's play the kind of music we grew up with. So it freaking worked.
It's really, I keep getting the chills because it's like, there was no great cerebral process. This was like, we're 13, we're just going to do what we do. We don't care about anything. We're locked in our own little world. And all of a sudden these albums came out, and my style with The Authority, that was the band I was in the 90s, playing all those shows, was funk, rock. We were Van Halen meets Santana meets Prince meets James Brown. And wow. I have that heavy funk influence, but I also, unabashedly will say, I love arena rock. It became like a faux pas to say, oh, you love arena rock and all this stuff. That's what I grew up on, man. I was drinking Rianiti, going to Nassau Coliseum, seeing Foreign.
That's great. Oh my gosh, so much there. So how serendipitous it is that, you saw Matt, you guys got together, talked about what you wanted to do. You were able to recruit Shelby, and here you are. You put something out that in 1 month has over 40,000 streams. That's really well. When do we get to hear more from this project?
We have the album completed. We're
Okay.
just mixing a couple more tunes. We actually are already working on our second album, and the next single drops Inauguration Day. I think it's like January 20th, and it's a song that came through. It's called Simply Avante, and when it, I feel like, not to get too woo woo, but I'm a spiritual dude. I feel like songs are in the ether, and the songs choose who they want to come through. And for some reason, these songs chose me and Matt. And that song, Simply Avante, the next song that's coming out, when it came through, I was like, when it first came through, I was like, this song sounds like Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, but with a modern edge. And I never listened to Pete Seeger or Woody Guthrie. It's not something I put on often, but I was like, it sounds like a song that's been in the ether for 100 years, but chose this moment in time to be released. And then it all worked out, and it's just a prayer. It's not political. It's not anything. It's just a prayer. And it all kind of just works that way. And I really believe in that song. I really believe in the album. I'm like, every song to me is really, really, really like, it came through, it shows us. And the song, every song is incredible. We're not necessarily exactly like Radio Warning. Each song is like, remember the bands we grew up in? You didn't know if Journey was going to do Separate Lives or Open Arms.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you were like, I love all of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved. I loved when music would come out and I was like, what's this band going to sound like on this album?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So are you guys going to tour, Brian?
Well, that's the $1 million question. Here's what I can tell you.
Okay.
I want to tour this. This is live music. This is music to let your hair down and rock the rafters to. But we got to build a big enough following that it makes sense, because I don't want to ask my Aunt Sylvia to come down to a show on a Tuesday night, and I'm asking all my friends. And because when we go out, it's got to be our fans, and that this music resonates too. And the way things are going right now, I believe we're on that trajectory to put on a hell of a rock and roll show. These are players. We are players. My dream and my vision is, I saw Anderson .Paak at Red Rocks this summer.
Oh.
And have you seen that guy drum?
I have I'm embarrassed to say, only in that Super Bowl show. That's the only time I've seen him play. I've seen a couple other videos, actually, now that I think of it. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So what he did was, it reminded me of like a full day block party. So his opening band are all incredible musicians, right? So they came out, his trumpet player came out, did his gig with some of the other players in the band. Then his background singers, they did like a Destiny's Child type thing, and your hair was standing up. Then the next guy came out, and it was his backing band, and they did a show. And then Anderson .Paak came out. It was 3.5 hours of nonstop joy, and him playing drums. And that's my vision, is not like an hour and 15 minutes. Everybody has so much talent. Shelby is such an unbelievably gifted musician with his own talent. My dream would be to put on like a full block party celebration of music where everybody is able to just tune out and really celebrate music. That's the dream here. And it's going to happen, man. It's going to happen.
That is so cool. Congratulations on all that. I want to show a video of you playing, and then I want to talk a bit about your musical upbringing, your drumming, and all of that stuff in Long Island and whatnot. We'll dig into that. But first, folks, check this out.
Hey, everybody. I'm Brian from Mind Reader, and I am so excited to play drums right now. Brian, nothing I love more than putting on the headphones, disappearing into the world of drums. It's the best.
Love that. So I notice, your ambidexterity skills are great. Who's your influence when it comes to playing like what we just saw? Who are some of those influences? The Police, Stewie, Stuart Copeland. Awesome. That makes sense. That makes total sense.
The hi-hat work of Stuart Copeland. It's like, so there are 3 different patterns. I just filmed that the other night. So the first pattern for the drummers out there is a paradiddle diddle. Right, left, right, right, left, left, and a 6/8 feel. And that's all that is just moving that around the kit with some kick drum in there and just giving different voicings to that pattern. That's all that is.
That's cool. Before we dive deeper into the drumming, I want to relay a question. In fact, I'll put it on the screen. This is from Steven, our producer, says, what was it like having Michael Brauer produce, mix, and master this, referring to the new single and album? He's worked with a bunch of artists like Paul McCartney, Coldplay, and the Rolling Stones. I've never heard of them, but I'm sure people know who that is. What was that like? That's a great question, Steve.
Well, I appreciate the question, Steve. It is unfriggin' believable because we're musicians, we're not mixers. And what I noticed when we mixed the project is, as a musician, you're like, okay, that sounds good. Okay, I hear this. Okay, I hear that. When we get the mix back from Michael, he doesn't mix safe. He's a very active mixer. So the way that I would say with Michael, when you get it back, besides it just being mind-blowing because he's a genius, what Michael does is things are not in the safe category. So, for example, we just got a mix back that I had no idea what my left hand was doing. It's a 6/8 pattern. He put it so high up in the mix. I was like, did I play that? Like, it just gets buried. Like, how do you get those ghost notes? He'll put the vocal 10 dB above where you think it should be, but it works. What everybody does is mix safe. Michael doesn't mix safe. He mixes with emotion. And the genius of Michael is he knows how to find the emotion in the song. So Radio Warning is really interesting. When we did the first mix, everything was safe. It was in its pocket. And if you listen to Michael's mix, the guitars are, wow, they're screaming, those guitars. I didn't even know Matt played half those lines. And I was like, wow. Matt, I didn't even know you did that because we're too scared. Like when we're doing a mix, I'm not going to say, hey, turn the guitar up 10 dB over here. But that's the brilliance. And if anybody has the ability, because our skill set as musicians, it's not mixers. It's just not.
Did you know before you recorded that he was going to be the one to mix it?
No, I had no idea. I didn't know Shelby was going to sing on it. I didn't know any of this.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Great question, Steve. Great answer. Wow, what a neat story. Ray Lombardo says, let's put this up here. Ray Lombardo says, kit, kick, rack. What happened to proper traditional terminology? Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I was just saying to someone like yesterday, the day before, Seven Antonopoulos, who we had on yesterday, where back in my day, I'm in my 60s, it wasn't called a rack tom. It was called a hang tom. Ooh. It was called a hang tom and a bass drum, not a kick. And you don't kick anything. So I find I like this comment because I find, and it was a drum set, not a kit. So yeah, I don't know what proper terminology is. So I don't know, Ray, if you're saying this is proper terminology or what I just spewed out is proper terminology. But it's interesting that whatever it is, we all understand what it's referring to, right? Which is neat.
And non-drummers just say boom, boom, tap, crack.
Exactly. Like, for instance, my floor toms are not on the floor. They don't have legs. They're mounted on a stand. Floor toms. By size, I guess. But yeah, let's talk about your musical upbringing and your drumming journey, who you took lessons for. I knew you took lessons from some extremely impressive, influential drummers.
Yes. So my drumming journey started in the public school system and in 4th grade. And the teacher, we were in Roy Burns elementary. Yeah, that was my first book that I was in, and what was really important for me was learning how to read. Learning how to read was critical for my education because once I could see it visually, then I could piece things together. So the public school system was great, and I was terrible at sports. I was completely uncoordinated in everything that I did, but for some reason, I had this gift of drumming that was really surprising to me because I remember in the drum lessons, I was in with some of the popular kids, like they were drumming, and I was better than them. And I was like, there got to be something wrong here. How could I possibly be better than David Colarusso?
That's funny.
So in sixth grade, that's when we graduated elementary school in New York. They gave me the opportunity to play drums along with the chorus, like at the graduation. Like I played 25 or 6 to 4. We did a couple other tunes. I write this, and all of a sudden I was Brian the drummer, and it was like my identity as a drummer.
Yeah.
And I really got into. I started to study at Alto Music in New York, which is a legendary music store, and then I started to teach when I was at college at the Long Island Drum Center, but it was up in Nyack in New York. They had a bunch of locations, and because of that, the Long Island Drum Center was literally at the foundation of drumming in New York, and they had the best teachers in the world. So when I say the best teachers in the world, Jim Chapin, who wrote Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, was Harry Chapin's dad. Jim was one of the teachers, and I got in with everybody. So I studied with Jim. I studied with Joe Morello, who was the drummer of Take 5 with Dave Brubeck. So legendary, and what an honor it is for me, like even at this point, because I'm older also. So these legendary cats are all past, and I had the ability, like the blessing, that I was able to really get a part of their energy, learn from these guys that wrote classic books. Dennis Chambers came in, doesn't read a lick of music, not one lick of music, but he was teaching me a bunch of these Latin rhythms. And then Frankie Malabé, who, I don't know if any of you have this, but this is called Afro-Cuban Rhythms for Drum Set. Mm-hmm. And what it takes is all these traditional Latin music, because I was brought up in New York, the Bronx, salsa, merengue, songo, all these legendary rhythms, like these sacred rhythms, were these Latin masters were all right there in the Bronx, and they'd come to the Long Island Drum Center. So Frankie has passed, but I was able to study his book with Frankie Malabé and learn these incredible Latin rhythms. And then one day I was going in with Dave Garibaldi from Tower of Power, and I was in the back room drumming and he came in and he sat me down and he was like angry at me. And he said to me, he goes, "Why are you here?" And I said, I'm freaked out because what did I do to piss Dave Garibaldi off? And he said, "You got to play, man. You got to get out and you got to play. It's enough of the studying. It's enough. Get out and play. Get out and play." And that is really when the real education started, right from that moment.
So let me ask you this. That is so rich. There's so much there. Let's start with Joe Morello. If you could name one thing that you took away from studying with Joe, what would it be? As a drummer, what is it that still sticks with you that you got from Joe?
So relaxed, so ergonomic behind the kit. And Joe had vision issues. He was blind when I was with him. And his composure behind the kit, like if you listen to Take 5, man, he swings in 5/4 like he's just swinging. The average listener wouldn't know that it's even in a different time signature. And why that was so revolutionary, because jazz was always in 4/4 or double time. There wasn't a lot of odd at that time. There was. So when that came out, Take 5, it was legendary. Why is that record? If you walk into a mall or you're in an elevator, you hear Take 5, I promise you, every drummer, even if you never heard it, is going to be like, their ears perk up. Why? because it's perfect, because it swings, because there's no friction in his groove. Zero. It's ergonomic as a drummer could be.
There's a wonderful black and white video of them performing that and Joe doing a solo. And we have to remember that back in those days, everyone wore a suit and a tie on top of all this other stuff, right? It's crazy when I see people like Joe, Papa Joe Jones, Speedy Rufus Jones, all the greats of that time just wailing away at these solos in a suit and tie. Like, it's amazing. And what about from Mr. Chapin? What's the big takeaway there, Brian?
Wow. Jim was a larger than life character, very intimidating to me. It's very intimidating. I was very young and I'm going in with these guys and I'm studying advanced technique for the modern drummer. And I'm like, I better nail this because this guy, look, Jim had a very on top feel. So Jim's feel was like, is more aggressive. He was almost like a rock and roll drummer as a jazz drummer is the only way I could describe it. It wasn't incredibly relaxed. It was more like, I don't want to say aggressive, but
kind of there's some pensiveness there in his playing, maybe.
It was more aggressive. It was more like dexterity. It wasn't like, it was more like, it was more like that.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. And how old were you when you studied with those guys?
20, 21, 22.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool because you had quite a few years already under your belt as a drummer. You know how to read music. So you went in with them with some good, history of playing and knowledge already. And then that playing with those two gentlemen must have just taken your understanding of music, let alone your dexterity and drumming skills to a whole nother level. Well, it goes without saying, of course.
It's just such a, I just believe when you're able to get in the essence of these masters, that if a little bit, just to be in the same room as them, if a little bit rubs off on you, what a blessing, what a blessing that is.
That's cool. Is there some contemporary music that you're fond of? Some newish? When I say contemporary, I mean anything that's been out in the last 10 or 15 years. Shows how old I am. To me, that's new music.
Well, my favorite drummer is Pat Hallahan from from My Morning Jacket. And
yeah.
Holy smokes, man. That is so, as when I was dormant in my musical playing and my musical journey when I was building my businesses, My Morning Jacket just speaks to me because they're the type of band, if you're not familiar with them, and they've been around for 20 years already. They go from Americana to heavy metal. And the Authority was similar to this in the capacity that usually when you see a band live, the bottom is here and their top is here. Well, if somebody self-combusted at a My Morning Jacket gig and blew up, I wouldn't even be surprised because there is no ceiling for what those guys could do. They are legendary. And what I love about them is I see them at Red Rocks. They'll play 3 nights in a row, no repeats. And I know their entire catalog. And it's like a religious experience for me by the time I'm done. Like night 2 picks up right where night 1 left off. And Pat is the type of drummer, he's a beast. But he's so musical. And he creates this energy. It's almost like billowing off of him. His drums are this sacred place. And I'm getting the chills again, man, because I watch him play and it's almost like I can see like vibration coming off of his kit, and he's perfect and he's a monster. He's like a Sasquatch of he's incredible. Check him out, anybody.
Yeah.
Check this guy out. He's a legend.
Absolutely. We'll look into that and have him on. That's awesome. Thanks. I love learning about stuff musicians I don't know about. I've got kind of in my own personal, like obviously on Jump Talk TV, we've interviewed hundreds of artists in 12 years. And the other show I do with Stephen Yes Shift, dozens and dozens of amazing artists tied to the band Yes and their periphery, other people who have worked with them like Steve Hackett and whatnot.
Sure.
But my lane is a little narrow, but it's very deep. And I love learning about people like you. people like when I met Seven Antonopoulos 12 years ago, and when I meet all these other amazing musicians, it's great because you said something earlier that nothing is truer. It's music can bring so much joy, and there's so much talent out there. And something else that you mentioned, the number one thing about music is music should be fun first. And you've got to have fun. And you said when you kind of got out of the professional game for a while, became an entrepreneur, you were still in bands. You were playing for fun because it's fun. And that's really what music is all about. Music, fun, feeling, emoting different things. That's what it's all about. So little side note for you, or curveball for everybody else. Just curious, the curiosity's killing me. What was your entrepreneurial journey? What was your business that you created and sold? If you don't mind talking about it.
I don't mind talking about it at all. So I moved out here with $900 to my name, and I left the Authority, and I didn't know how to do anything but drum. Zero. That was all I knew how to do. I just knew how to play those drums. And in my mind, I was going to be a rock star because we were doing really well. We played Duke Arena and opened up for the Spin Doctors in front of 10,000 people. I was primed for a rock star, and it just didn't happen. So it's like, oh boy, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm on my way. And there's no master plan with me, man. I kind of just, I'm open. I'm open to receive. I'm just really open to receive. And I got into the electronic payment industry, which was the credit card industry.
Oh.
And the way that worked back
That'll
in the day.
never take off. Come on.
They used to say when I first got into it, they do like graphs like, and by online spending will pass cash and all, and I'd like, oh, those projections are off. And I just got into it at the right time, and I met the right guys, and we built a software company that had to do with medical compliance. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was this big entrepreneur. And then we sold the company in 2022. And then that's when all this music just started, like through the blessing, just came into my life again.
Do you mind if I ask how much you sold it for?
A lot.
Okay, that's a good number. Good for you. Congratulations. That's awesome. That is really cool. So here's my last question for you is the official Brian Sachs fun fact segment. When you're not recording, not producing, not listening to someone else's mixes, not writing lyrics, not working on your chops, making music videos, recording albums, when you're totally away from music and probably that small sliver of time, what do you like to do? Do you go places? Do you collect things? What do you like to do that is completely outside of music?
I love doing this type of breathing. It's called breath work and going into freezing cold water. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do.
Awesome. So you do the ice plunge, the cold
I do
plunge?
ice plunging, and for the last 13 years, I go into the Alaskan wilderness every summer, get dropped off by bush plane, and have to get from point A to point B. And a lot of music comes to me in the Alaskan wilderness as well, because you're totally removed from everything. And in year 8, I got stared down by a grizzly bear for about 8 minutes and wasn't sure if I was going to get eaten.
Wow. What did you do? What did you start singing Take 5 and it started grooving? Like what happened?
I'll be completely authentic. I'm going to give you a funny answer. I swear this is the truth. It's kind of, I never thought I'd be talking about this, but I saw a grizzly bear and I heard my mother's voice in my head, and in a very Jewish New York accent, she said, "Brian, there's a grizzly bear there." And I said, "I know, Ma." And she goes, "Who goes to Alaska for 8 years in a row and you don't think you're going to see a grizzly bear? You have a wife, you have a kid, you have a career. You're going to get eaten by a grizzly bear." That's really what happened in my head.
Wow. How did it go away? Or I heard you're supposed to clap to keep them away from you. That's what I've heard.
The truth of the matter is my knees were knocking. I thought I was going to wet myself.
That would have been okay if that was the worst of it.
And then I was okay with whatever. There was really a moment of peace, and I was like, I don't want to go. Yeah. But I didn't freak out. I held my ground. I just held my ground, and I held my ground. And I was with the guide, and then the bear just kind of like looked, and then he went the other way. And
So most smart people know never fuck with a drummer. The bear must have known you were a drummer. When you
I
hit
was
stuff
gonna
for a
just,
living.
well, I was also thinking, I don't have to run faster than a bear. I just have to run faster than my guide. So that was it.
So describe point A to point B. Is that just total utter wilderness? When you get dropped off, you're with the guide. Are you with other people or just the guide?
It's just the guide. I used to go with one of my old business partners, but he almost died year 6 in a major kayaking incident, so he canceled.
Okay.
And you get dropped by bush plane. There are no trails. Very hard to get rescued if you have any rescue.
Wow.
And you have to go through some of the most vicious, hardest terrain. If you don't have your survival gear, you won't even last one day. This last July I was like, I've seen it all. I've had wind, I've had mosquitoes, I've had grizzly bears, I've had almost dying in a kayaking. There's nothing, I've had intense heat. Well, this year we had cold like I've never experienced in my entire life, almost like hypothermic cold. So it was cold, raining, and the breathing technique really helped. But you have to really tap into yourself, get out of your mind, get into the present moment. And it's a lot like music, because what I really feel like with music also is get out of your head, get into the flow. And when I'm playing a gig, the first thing I think about is, all right, my breathing. Am I breathing? Am I breathing when I'm playing the drums? Am I grooving? Am I in it? Am I looking at the person eating a chicken cordon bleu sandwich and seeing if they're digging my groove, or am I really focusing in on myself and the groove? And once I'm there, then I'm like, all right, am I grooving with the bass player? Am I grooving? Am I in the pocket? And then once I could just get into the moment and get rid of all that chatter, then I'm in flow. And they call it ashe. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes, yes. So it's the same thing when you're out there in the wilderness. And are you doing cold plunging at home? Do you do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, I go into the creeks here in Boulder, and I'm going to do it. In fact, this weekend, today, my Alaskan guide is coming to visit me here, and we're going to go cold plunging all weekend.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have another friend who does cold plunging, and he has a tank at home outside. And the way he described it is he's a little younger than me. I think he's like late 50s. And he said that it did more for the experience of getting in the habit of that, has done more for his body and his spirit than anything he's ever done before.
Totally.
Is it about the circulation, and is it about the tolerance level that you build up, and the just being in that moment of literally the freezing cold water? And like, how do you explain how you experience it when you're in the plunge itself?
So in terms of breathing, and it's good for a musician, so there's definitely a correlation here, is any
And he's a
musician.
drummer.
Yeah, as a drummer, as any musician, if you or anything in life, your breathing dictates where you are in the moment. So if you're not aware of your breathing, then you're not really in the present moment, because you're in your head, or you're in the past, or you're in the future, you're not in the present moment. So doing breathing before you go in cold water is critical, because then you attune to your water. What's the first thing that most people do if they're in cold water? They hold their breath. So that is the exact opposite of how you could possibly get through that. So the first minute you get in, I just went in this past week, I lead people into cold water. It was freezing outside also. So keep that in mind. I don't have a controlled environment. I like when it's freezing outside also. So you go in, what's the first thing that happens? I can hardly even talk, man. But then I start to breathe. And then I actually start to relax in the water. I'm actually relaxed. And by about breath 4, I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. I can do this. And I count my breaths. And by the time I get out, it's like your skin is on fire and you are more alive, more present, more like the adrenaline is going, and it's like,
That's awesome.
It's the greatest drug in the world is cold water. You need to be trained. You need to properly go in there. There's a protocol to do it, but it is, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So how you approach one thing is how you do it. So, I like to bring the correlation back to being a musician, being a drummer, and performing. Like when you're on stage or you're performing, there's a lot of anxiety. There's, it's not the rehearsal in the room. The sound's different. The environment's different. Everything is different. All right. Get yourself
And
in
there's
tune.
no do-overs.
There's no do-overs. Get yourself in the moment. Get out of your head, man. Get in the moment and get in flow. It's all that, man. It's all that. And if you're flowing as a drummer, if you're not flowing, guess what? The audience ain't going to feel it. I don't care how great the guitar player is or anything. It is your job as a drummer to create that foundation that people can let their hair down and relax and groove and feel the groove. And when I was talking about Anderson .Paak earlier, Anderson .Paak, I was so ashe, and ashe for those that don't know, it's kind of like a trance. They say, whoever they is, that it takes about 45 minutes for a drummer to get into flow. Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that. If you drum enough, I can get there in 3 minutes.
Yeah, but I agree with you on that. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. That was a great fun fact segment. Wow. Cold plunge. So folks, go to Spotify. I think Steve has the link to the YouTube video as well in the Facebook and YouTube as we're live, and it's going to archive right away. And then Steve's going to put it on Instagram, X, and Vimeo. The YouTube link is in there. I believe the Spotify link is in there as well. You can check out the new single that dropped a month ago today. My bad on the notes. October 22nd, 2024. Over 40,000 streams already. Brian, can't wait to hear the rest of this album and hopefully get to see you out this way, out west on tour. But we'll stay in touch. I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. There's nothing I love more than talking about music and drums and flow. So this has been a real honor for me. Thank you so much, Dan.
You're welcome. Likewise, the honor is mine as well. And thank you, folks, for following what we do, winding down the year here on Drum Talk TV. If you're watching this live or you see it before noon today, November 22nd, at noon today, Pacific time, that is, I'm paying homage to 50 years of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I'm going to play to the whole thing. And then lots of few other 50-year moments as we wind down the year. And we've got our documentary debut on the 8th and a couple fun game shows, all of that stuff. Maybe Brian will join and kick everyone's butts. He's quite a big music trivia buff, so we'll see how that goes. But thanks for following what we do, and we will see you all very soon. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.